Good morning, good morning. All right. LDS stories of faith and courage. Courage. What have they got that I don't got? Courage. The original, true Wizard of Oz. That is a good classic. All right. Now we are on A Storm at Sea by Hamilton Park. An unforgettable day in the lives of two missionaries in Scotland, who witnessed the heroic efforts to rescue the crews of some grounded ships in a raging storm. Ooh. Yikes. From my early childhood, it seemed as if I had inherited a more than ordinary fondness for the sea. For oft times, when a very small lad, I have slipped away, our home being in the city of Glasgow, to wander among the ships, among the shipping of Brumelaw. In those days of wooden ships, every seagoing vessel carried upon her prow what was known as the figurehead. This was the likeness of a human being, universally that of a woman, and not a few of them exhibited in their formation and adornings so much good taste and artistic skill that they were quite interesting and pretty. Their singular position and posture in those times of superstition surrounded them with a degree of mystery. The left foot well advanced with the knee bent, and the right set back as if forming a brace to the body as it slightly inclined forward, the hair hanging loose with a storm-tossed appearance, the earnest, anxious, peculiar expression of the face, the far-away look in the eyes, as if searching for some long-distant object, gave to them a somewhat weird appearance. And frequently, in fancy, I have conjured them into life as the angel guardians of the perilous deep. This love of the great waters did not wane as time rolled past, for when I had attained to the years of manhood, and had gone out into the world as a missionary, bearing the message of the everlasting gospel to the nations of the earth, if in a city or town by the sea, a walk on the shore or among the shipping seemed to possess a charm for me that but a few others things possessed, and I thought helped better to prepare my mind for the more spiritual duties which were to follow, and not a few times, when in fishing districts have I stood, and with much interest watched the fishermen's wives and children clean the nets as they were drawn out upon the beach, while fathers, brothers, and sons sought a little rest and sleep. And I frequently thought, as I viewed the many ungainly-looking things that had come entangled in the meshes of the nets, and which those faithful workers and wondrous care were cutting loose and casting away, that if elders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in their going forth as fishers of men, gathered in the gospel net, what wonder, then, that some of them throughout the years should manifest their true nature and inwardness, and occasionally stir up a little friction in the camp of the saints. Well, that is an interesting reflection on things. On the morning of the 15th of March, 1877, I left the city of Glasgow upon a missionary tour to Aberdeen, the so-called capital of the north of Scotland, proposing to make sundry calls and hold meetings at a number of places by the way. I had for a companion during part of our journey Elder James McFarlane of Weber County, Utah. Our first stopping place was the city of Edinburgh, where we called on the few saints residing there and held meetings with them, and a few friends in the evening. Our next point was St. Andrews, pleasantly situated by the bay of the same name in the North Sea, or German Ocean. There were quite a number of places of great interest and historic note in and around this little city by the sea, but rain was pouring down in torrents and the wind blowing a stiff breeze from the ocean, so that it was simply too much to attempt anything like sightseeing under such conditions. There being no members of the church residing in the place, we passed the time as best we could as best we could talking gospel principles wherever we could find the slightest opportunity. We retired for the night, counting upon an early start the following morning for Crail, Pettenween, and East Newark, small towns situated along the coast. During the night, the windstorm had increased, and toward the morning a gale was blowing from the ocean that was little short of terrific, and the waters of the bay were lashed into a great fury. But we were up and ready to start out as soon as daylight showed the way. We had proceeded but a short distance when the heavy report of cannon startled the city's most early risers, and men were soon running from all parts toward one particular point. We turned about and followed. A large vessel, through the stress of weather, had been driven from her course in the bay and was fast aground in the sand, the great waves breaking over her and threatening every moment the destruction of the vessel, a watery grave to all on board who were firing signals of distress. I had often, when a lad, read in storybooks of the minute gun, the minute gun at sea, but never before had I listened to the sad and dismal sound. As the dull boom of that gun came over the waves through the terrible storm and fell upon our ears like a wail of sorrow, our feelings can be more correctly imagined than described. But all of a sudden, a stillness like that of death fell upon that excited throng of men and women, for women had gathered there also. The lifeboat, by its brave and valiant crew, was being pushed out at that moment. A young man, one of their number, a fine-looking fellow, came hurrying along, and by his side was a fair girl who clung to him in such a manner that he almost had to carry her as he walked. Whether he was her brother or lover, or had recently become her husband, I could not learn, but his companions had already taken their places in the boat, and with their oars were endeavoring to steady the little craft. As he came near to them, he again and again pressed the pale lips of the girl, and having gently unloosed her upon him, he, with one sudden bound, sprang to the boat, and with strong arms and brave heart the crew pulled away on their errand of mercy over that terrible sea. The beautiful girl stood there, knee-deep in the angry surf, with pale-faced and wistful eyes, her intense gaze fixed upon that little dark receding speck on those foaming billows that bore away to danger and perchance to death the dearest and best beloved of all the earthly treasures of her human heart. The winds, as if in cruel mockery, tossed and tumbled at random the long bright tresses of her flowing hair. Then for the first time I beheld the living, moving ideal of my boyhead's dreaming, the mystic figurehead. But the boat returned laden until her very rowlocks dipped with men, 2 women, and 1 tiny baby girl. As her keel grated upon the sands of the beach, the shout that went up from the multitude that had gathered there, despite the severity of the storm, rang out high above the dull, hoarse moanings of the wind and waves. The boat went back to the stranded ship and came again. All were rescued. All were saved. With feelings somewhat akin to sadness, we resumed our journey toward the town of Creole, deeply impressed with the scenes we had just witnessed and the fearful risks of life and limb brave men will take in aid of their fellows in the hour of the greatest danger and peril. The storm continued with little abatement throughout the entire day, and as our road lay close by the shore in full view of the ocean, we had repeatedly the opportunity of witnessing the struggles of a number of small trading vessels in tackling and retackling with all the skill and courage known to the brave men aboard to escape with their little ships from being driven onto the rocks of that dangerous coast. We reached the town of Creole late in the afternoon, and upon inquiry learned that there was a building in the place called the Town Hall, which strangers sometimes hired for religious meetings and other purposes, but that the head man of the town, as they called him, a kind of mayor on a small scale, was the proper person to be consulted. After learning the gentleman's name and address, we started out to find him. He proved to be a generous, kind-hearted, and broad-minded man, and received us in most pleasant manner. We told him who we were, and we wished to obtain a suitable place in which to hold a meeting that evening. We were traveling without purse or script, and had not prepared to pay a large sum of money for the use of the hall. He replied, "Gentlemen, our building contains an upper and lower hall. You can have use of the lower one without money and without price. The upper hall we reserve wholly for the business purposes of our little burg." He further stated that if we would write a notice, he would send out the town crier, as he was called, throughout the streets of the village and notify the people. After expressing our gratitude for the gentleman's kindness, we wrote out the following notice: 2 missionaries of the Church of Latter-day Saints from America will lecture on Mormonism in the town hall this evening at 7:30. All are cordially invited. No collection. Not bad. I would have had the Church of Jesus Christ in there, but no, that was the times. Now, the town crier was a very short, broad man with a drum. He took our slip of paper and started out to the music of rub-da-dub, rub-da-dub. Then, halting a moment, he would call out in a strong, clear voice the words we had given him. And so he continued his rub-a-dub. It seriously says rub-a-dub-dub, until the people of the place were pretty thoroughly notified. Which makes me wonder if the old rub-a-dub-dub song was a drum roll. Or sorry, that was a poem? How would I put it? Anyway, so it's a drum roll. All right. Until the people of the place were pretty thoroughly notified. Thinking that we had done about all that we could do towards our meeting in the evening, we bethought ourselves of a little something to eat, as we had not partaken of anything since early morning. But before we had found a suitable place, a cry was heard, "A vessel ashore! A vessel ashore!" In the excitement of the moment, we forgot our hunger and followed close upon the heels of the foremost runners toward the point on the coast where the vessel lay among the rocks, being literally torn to pieces in that terrible storm. She was but a small craft, and had been driven so close to the land that it required but a short time for an experienced seaman, following in the wake of the receding wave, to cast a line upon her deck, followed by a strong cable, and the men on board, some 7 or 8 in number, after casting into the sea everything among their effects that would float, came hand over hand along the cable safely on shore, with all the little belongings that could be fished from those stormy waters. They were taken to the town hall, to the very room which we had made arrangements to occupy, at 7:30 in the evening, which time was then close at hand. I immediately called on our friend the mayor. He was already aware of the situation, and although, as he said, it was contrary to their custom, he would grant us the use of the upper hall for our meeting. As the hour arrived, our little hall was well filled with very respectable-looking congregation of men and women. We had sung a hymn, and Brother McFarland had offered a very earnest prayer to the throne of grace, and was on my feet, hymn book in hand, ready to give out a second hymn, when again a cry from the street below startled that entire congregation. "Another vessel ashore! Another vessel ashore!" It had happened that there were present quite a number of the men who were the most prominent in the former wreck and rescue, and the way those men got out of that building onto the street was simply dangerous. The remainder followed in all kind of a pell-mell way, and Brother McFarland and myself were not the last either. I dropped my spectacles and hymn book upon the little stand in front of me, picked up my hat, and was among the first to reach the place, which was about a mile distant and near to the same spot of the former wreck. This time it was a large 3-masted schooner, and although fast among the rocks, the sea breaking over her with great fury, she was still quite a distance from land, and difficult to reach with a line. Rocket after rocket was sent with great force, whirling through the storm, but fell short of the schooner. At last, one great rocket passed right through her rigging, carrying a line over her decks. It was greeted by a faint cheer from the poor half-drowned fellows on board, but received a hearty echo from those upon the shore. A strong cable was, as quickly as possible, stretched from the vessel to the land with an attachment they called a cradle. There were on board only the captain and the captain's wife, and a working crew of some 20 men or more, just sufficient to man the vessel. The captain's lady was the first brought safely on shore, then one by one the seamen followed, the captain being the last to leave his ship, and all were taken to the town hall, to the same place as the former crew has made as comfortable and as kind women and brave men could make them under the circumstances, with the exception of the captain's lady, who was otherwise provided for. It was past midnight when Brother McFarland and myself found a little rest at the house of one of the brave rescuers of the evening, who had learned a little about whom we were, and kindly volunteered us to the hospitality of his humble home, and for the remainder of that long-to-be-remembered night on the rock-bound coast of the North Sea, near the town of Crail, Fifeshire, Scotland. Fifeshire. Wow. Jeez Louise. I'm so glad everyone made it out alive. Wow. Wow. Dude, I love the beach. I love being along the shore. I think it's fun and nice, and I'm grateful that I'm a visitor to it. Because every book I read about People who lived or were lived along the shore were sailors had to deal with the fury of the sea pounding upon them in some way. Wow. I think it's a testimony to the mercy of God that so many people were kept safe at that time. Not everyone gets that. I was given the opportunity to understand why shipwrecks can be so just absolutely terrifically dangerous. Because someone pointed out, look, if you're being blown by the wind across the waves, maybe you're going 20, maybe 30 miles an hour if you're lucky. But just even at 20 miles an hour, if you're in a very strong and sturdy boat, and it suddenly runs aground and stops, you, as a passenger, are going 20 miles an hour. And the boat that you are in has stopped. It is like being in a car going 20 miles an hour and immediately stopping, and you have no seatbelts. And I'm not sure how fast these boats actually get, but I can only imagine that it would not do good things for you if you are in the ship, and it would not do good things for you if you are on top of the ship, being thrown over. So, the reason there was a time where I read a book that had to do with the golden age of pirates, and kind of the perfect storm of circumstances that made men turn to piracy, and how it worked, and how it eventually ended. That sailors in the English fleet were not treated well at all, to say the least. In fact, it was a horrible existence, basically. And because of that, many of them that turned pirate just wanted to be left alone. But then being left alone, they often meant that they had mutinied or abandoned ship or other things like that, which meant they were traitors. So, in for a penny, in for a pound, how are they going to survive? Well, might as well take things. And there was piracy where you had one country basically say, you are free to steal from and cause trouble for all these other countries. So like an Englishman, given that writ of basically the writ of piracy, I can't remember what it's specifically called, was given free rein to raid the French or the Spanish or the Dutch, whoever their enemy was at the time. And that way they could privateer, a writ of privateering. So they could basically consider themselves mercenaries, go after the Spanish and their ships to then take whatever it is. And it was usually just goods. Sometimes, treasure galleons were very well guarded, but whenever they shipwrecked, everyone was in on that. But most of the time it was just other small trading vessels that were carrying lumber and textiles and whatever else. So they take the whole thing, and that was the treasure. And you just go to a nearby town, you'd be able to sell it because you obtained it for just blood, sweat, and tears. You'd be able to sell it, usually at a discount, to those towns, which made them much happier instead of paying the higher regular price. And so you'd make money, and they'd save money, and everyone was a lot happier with that kind of arrangement. It was a very fascinating book, but they talked about how shipwrecks were one of the most horrible things that could happen. And they pointed out that, well, if you were really freely being tossed about by the sea or going really fast and then ran aground, you were toast. And often the nearby towns that would come upon these shipwrecked places, they'd benefit a lot from it. I mean, it's kind of a grim, grisly idea, but there's not much more to do. Your ship has ran aground. It's not going anywhere. The stuff that's inside it, it's not going to go anywhere. And so people would just grab what they could from the wrecks. It's free game then. Kind of a grisly thing, but man, I'm just so, God, there's just so many times where you have these I think that people who live near the sea, especially those small towns that lived with people on the sea, knew what it was like. Why safe harbors are so important. There's so much to be learned allegorically from the sea. All right. The power of faith. Let me see here. Oh, sorry. Gotta keep track of my time here. We're good. All right. The Power of Faith by William H. Smart. A powerful story telling how the loss of crops due to grasshoppers was averted by unshakable faith in the preserving hand of God. Oh, this is why we have the Seagull Monument in Temple Square, which, after all the renovations on the temple in Temple Square, it's going to be fun to see what it looks like afterwards. All right. A little colony of Latter-day Saints founded Franklin, the first permanent settlement of Idaho, in the spring of 1860, under the general supervision of the presiding bishop, Peter Mon of Logan. And by his appointment, they were in the immediate charge of my father, Thomas Sherritt Smart, and 2 assistants. I was born there 2 years later, and my earliest recollections are of incidents connected with the struggles of pioneer life, which was made more difficult and hazardous by marauding and ferocious Indians. So, this isn't even Salt Lake City, this is in Idaho. During my early childhood, there occurred what was termed a grasshopper war. After the spring crops were planted, myriads of grasshoppers hatched in the borders of the fields, which they invaded in hordes soon as they could hop. My father conceived of a resourceful plan of placing here and there over the wheat field round patches of straw. And when we then moved with scarce flags. I don't know what scarce flags are, and that's in quotations, so I'm wondering if they're just waving them? Anyways, we then moved with scarce flags in wide circles around them, driving the hoppers onto the straw, where they settled in thick black masses and were quickly destroyed by fire. Ooh, that's smart. Okay, so they waved them onto the straw and then torched them. As time went on, these hopping, devouring warriors acquired wings where they could no longer be successfully battled against in this manner, and the crops, up to now partially saved, were wholly at their mercy, and resistance in the fields seemed futile. Simultaneously with this field warfare was waged a similar one in the gardens of the village. One Thursday, my father and I, with wavering scare banners in our hands, were passing up and down the potato rows in our garden, shooing the flying hoppers from the vines. After we had been at work for some time, I being some distance behind father on my row, I noticed him leave the garden when he reached the north end of his row, climb over the old-time pole fence which marked the boundary line, and disappear over the precipitous hillside covered with willows and trees. An interested, curious desire to know of his whereabouts came over me. So, when I reached the end of my row, I quietly proceeded to climb upon the fence, and peered down the hill, hoping for a view of my father, whereupon I spied him some distance away by the side of a pathway, kneeling beneath a partially shielded box elder tree. Having from my earliest recollection been taught by precept and example the principle of private and family prayer, I understood at once the sacred and hallowed scene upon which I gazed with childish awe, slipped quietly back to my work, fearful that my father be disturbed or cognizant of my intrusion. After a time, my father returned to the garden and said, "Willie, we will stop now and go to fast meeting." Fast day then being on Thursday. I answered in some consternation, "The grasshoppers will eat the taters while we're gone," for I had become alarmed with misgivings as to the future possible hunger while helping in the fight and listening to the foreboding conversations as to the dire calamities which would follow crop destruction. Father answered, "Never mind, son. We will leave them in the hands of the Lord. We went to fast meeting with my mother and other members of the family in the pioneer meeting house of the village. After the usual hymns and prayer, the meeting was given over to testimony. After brief, impressive silence, there followed, for a protracted length of time, an impressive scene, the like of which I have never experienced since, and which language fails to depict. Fathers, wives, and children mingled their voices in songs and prayers and testimonies, pouring out their souls in fervent prayer unto God, pleading for divine interposition in their behalf against the flying, devouring grasshoppers, to the end that the sufficient crops be raised to ward off the threatening famine. Hardly a dry eye could be seen in the assembly. After all, so desiring had given vent to their feelings in some form, and thus the spirit of the occasion had spent itself, the meeting closed. As we passed from the building, the first thing that met our astonished gaze was an atmosphere of semi-darkness, as though the sun were in partial eclipse, and gazing upward to search for the reason, we discovered the heavens above us literally full of hoppers flying towards the south. Returning to our homes, gardens, and fields, we found that it had indeed been profitable to follow the faith of our Father. After we had exhausted our own resources, leave them in the hands of the Lord, for they had departed, and the remnant of the crops was saved. Wow. So they just up and started migrating. Wow. Early Life in Great Salt Lake Valley by John D.T. McAllister. This is an enlightening story of the earliest days in Salt Lake, and particularly of the construction of the Salt Lake Temple. There has been so much said and written of our early everyday life in the valley, I scarcely know where to commence, but make a few extracts from my journal. I found it interesting that they would write so much about their early days here, yet how much of it do we remember? Like, truly. This was 1847, 1850 time frame. 1950s, 2000s, so it's been 175 years. Several generations for sure, but in a way, it's right around the corner. On the 20th of June, 1851, we left Canesville for the 6-mile grove beyond winter quarters. Now, Florence, with a wagon and 5 yoke of cattle, where I was appointed clerk of Alfred Corden's company of 50 wagons. On the 1st of July, we started for the valley of the Great Salt Lake. After 3 months' travel over plains, sandhills, and mountains, making roads, building bridges, wading rivers, and large streams of water, upsetting my wagon on a sidling road, wife and 2 children under it, with our boxes, cooking utensils, provisions, and bedding on top of them, all arrived safely and well on the 1st of October. Met with the saints the next Sunday in a bowery on the south side of the then open Temple Block. President Brigham Young and the presiding authorities were present. My soul was made glad, and with a heart overflowing with gratitude, I thanked my God for the privilege I had of living to see his anointed servants, hear their voices, and walk in the light of revelation. Just before we reached the city, we met several of the federal officers returning who had been appointed to fill the position of trust. They were missed, but not forgotten. Brocas Day and Bandberry and Harris too, the secretary. They've gone, they went, but when they left us, they only of themselves bereft us. Wonderful. Just after my arrival, I commenced work on the public works. They were located on the north side of the Temple Block. There were the carpenter and paint shops, blacksmith and foundry, machine shop, stone cutter sheds, and a saw pit where lumber was made by hand. Wow, that's a lot. carpenter, paint shop, blacksmith, foundry, machine shop, stonecutter shed, saw pit. Wow. My residence was near the mound, near the mound in the 16th Ward on the block now known as the UP Railway Depot. In the spring of 1852, I built me a house in the east end of the lot where the headquarters of Salt Lake Fire Department now stands, and of which I was the chief engineer for 10 years. I was elected a member of the Deseret Dramatic Association. We fitted up the lower room of the council house for rehearsals, and on the corner opposite of the West of Zion's Savings Bank, under the direction of Brother Hiram B. Clausen and others, President Brigham Young encouraged us with his presence and experience. A number of parts were assigned to me. I performed several to the satisfaction of my brethren, not for pay, but for the amusement of the saints. I'm wondering if he was the fire chief. So, yeah, this is the place, Park, which is a place where they've taken a lot of pioneer buildings and homes and relocated them there, including Brigham Young's house and a whole bunch. One of them is a kind of fireman's community house. I'm wondering if that's the one that he was doing the plays in, and they preserved it up there. It's a beautiful place. I was also chosen a member of the Balo Brass Band, my instrument of music, the Athic Lighty? What is that? I'm sorry. Inquiring minds must know. A-P-H. Oop, I didn't get the A. A-P-H. I-C-L-E-I-D-E. Othiclide is a family of conical bore brass key instruments. So they spell it with an O. Here in this book it's an A, but it looks like that. It looks like a straight kind of bassoon or Othiclide. Wow. I have never seen this. Here are other depictions of it. Some of them obviously very large. Not quite a saxophone by any means. Very much kind of like a tuba almost. Wow. All right. I have learned something new and I am impressed. And for that I am grateful. That is neat. This is why you read good old books. You actually learn stuff, because it's so removed from how you live and work. Like, that's how I learned what pemmican was. I was reading a collection of Jules Verne, and one of the first books he had was 2 Weeks in a Balloon. And I thought, oh, this sounds like a crappy one. No, we'll see what it is. And it was actually really fascinating. I learned what pemmican was. Anyway, so he was the Balo Brass Band. His instrument was an Ophiclide. Dominicus Balo, our leader, was the best I had ever heard on the clarinet, this instrument being the lead one of our band. We took great delight in our practice and playing day and night. Presidents Young, Kimball, Richards, and others often thanked us and gave us their blessings. Brother Balo was not only a grand musician, but a real gentleman and a humble servant of the Lord as well as a hard-working man. In those early days, he could be seen with his sleeves and trousers rolled up in the adobe yard making adobes for building. We also had the Nauvoo Brass Band captain, William Pitt Leader. They were to be found mounted at the head of the cavalry. Ballow's band was in front of the infantry, as was also the Dimmick B. Huntington Marshall Band. What blessed glorious days those were. My time was occupied continually with daily labor, rehearsals, band practice, attending meetings, lyceum, drillings, reading, writing, arithmetic, and other studies, so as to improve my mind all I could to be useful in the kingdom of God. Okay, gotta look up another one. What is lyceum? L-Y-C-E-U-M. Lyceum. Lyceum is a category of educational institution defined within an education system. Lyceum International School. Huh, okay. So kind of an international studies, I suppose. And let's continue. On the 14th of February, 1853, the saints assembled on the temple block to witness the breaking and consecrating of the temple grounds. It was clear and a lovely day. A little snow on the ground, but the sun soon scattered it. The ground was frozen a few inches. While the brethren were assembling with their families, men, women, and children everywhere, they were cheered with the music from the Nauvoo and Balo bands. On the 6th of April, I attended the general conference. A great multitude was present. 4 cornerstones of the temple were laid. Conference continued up to the 10th, when President Young adjourned it, and to the 6th of the following October, and blessed every man and woman in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. On the 8th of this month, I was appointed for a mission to England with Israel Barlow, Philemon C. Merrill, James D. Ross, William W. Majors, Daniel Tyler, Albert P. Tyler, Benjamin Ashby, Henry E. Phelps, Lorenzo D. Rudd, Israel Evans, Jesse B. Martin, James Bond. That's literally one of the names, is James Bond. Lauren Roundy, Charles A. Foster, James Kerrigan, Willard G. McMullen, Charles R. Dana, and Joseph France. Charles R. Dana and Joseph France, Thomas Colburn to Germany, Samuel Savory and Milton Howe to the United States, Edward W. Wade and Cyrus Canfield to China. Wow. And on the 10th, Matthias Cowley to Europe, all to be under the direction of the presidency in that country. Previous to our starting, we organized ourselves by choosing Philemon C. Merrill, Captain John D.T. McAllister, Assistant, James Bond, Clerk, and Charles R. Dana, Chaplain of Company. The beautiful block of stone contributed by the state of Deseret Territory to the Washington Monument was entrusted to the care of Elder Merrill and myself. Whoa! To deliver to the committee at Washington. We were favored with letters of introduction to the committee and to the President Franklin Pierce from Governor Brigham Young and on the Honorable John M. Bernheisel. This is cool. I did not know that we contributed a stone to the Washington Monument from Utah. The following brief description is from the hand of the artist who, through modesty, failed to add his name, William Ward. Oh. To the stone, he having spent 40 days faithful labor upon it. The block is 3 feet long, 2 wide, and 6.5 inches thick. In the center stands a beehive and the emblem of industry. Over it is the motto, Holiness to the Lord. Above this is the all-seeing eye with rays. Beneath the hive is the word Deseret. Over this, springing from the ground, which is covered with different kinds of foliage, is a semicircular arch enshrined with the convolvulus. All right. Wow, this guy has a lot of different words I have never heard before. So what is convolvulus? Convolvulus is a genus of about 250 species of flowering plants, bindweed family. Is there any images? So basically an archway of plants. All right. This is not the time to hand that in front of me. I will be with you in a few pages. I'll be with you in a moment. I love it when my children come to me with, hey, I need you to sign this. Oh, I'm leaving in like 2 minutes. She's got time, thankfully, and I've got time. All right. The convolvulus. Wow, okay. General Conference, Deseret. On each side are spandrels, which is the symbol of the union enriched with foliage. In the other is the cornucopia. Near the edge is a fillet fillet, depending on how you want to say it, 1.5 inches wide and 3/4 of an inch deep. In this description, all is sufficient, though I will observe that on the account of fine particles of flint interspersed in the stone, the artist could not give it that polish he wished. After the conference was over, I was stricken down with symptoms of lung fever, caused by straining them while we were preparing to lay the cornerstone of the temple. On the outside of the excavation were a number of hillocks. We were laboring under the direction of Elder W.M. Cahoon, who called upon us to carry the large, heavy pole to rig shears at the southeast corner of the temple excavations. He gave the words, "String along, and up she comes." I was at the butt. Those ahead of me trod on the hillocks, taking the weight from my shoulders, and, stepping off it, came down on me with full force. I felt something give way in my chest, but did not give that attention to which I ought to have done. So he strained his lungs. Ouch. Ow, 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 ow. I wonder if anyone medical would know what that was. He called it lung fever, but basically because they were carrying the weight, because they were ahead of him, when finally they gave way and it fell on him, something gave way in his chest. I wonder if he tore some muscles, either in his chest or diaphragm or something. The word was circulated that I was worrying about my mission, and someone told President Young Mac's mission had made him sick. He sent Elder William C. Staines to see me, who made known to me what had been said, and that President had sent him to say that I need not go upon the mission. I could not describe my feelings, but it seems to shock my whole system. I said to Brother Staines, "I am going on my mission." What strength I had at that moment. I jumped out of bed, dressed, and walked up to the President's office. President Young was not in. I met him on East Temple Street, opposite the Temple block, in his open buggy. He extended to me his hand, smiling, said, "Johnny, how are you?" I answered, "Better," and said to him that I had received the word from Brother Staines, and that I wished to fulfill my mission, having arranged everything except conveyance. Said he, "We have arranged that for you. We want you to take that stone that we are donating to the Washington Monument," and made my appointment for me to accompany him to the First Ward to see about a suitable wagon. While on the way, we talked together about the mission, and those that he had taken, going where he had business, and not going and where he had none. He gave me this counsel: go where you are sent. It has been my key word throughout life. Wow. What stories. Awesome. So, men being witness to saving of so many lives along the seashore by courageous and faithful men. Communities of Idaho being preserved through the providence of God. And living in life in the Salt Lake Valley, being called on a mission, and overcoming strains to make sure you make it there. Wow, these are cool, and I hope they help you understand truly a lot more of what life was like. I know as a church we focus mostly on the pioneers and the struggles that they had against the environment, and the struggles that they had with establishing themselves here. But we really don't focus on the struggles that we had with the natives and the problems that they caused, probably because we want to think the best of them. I don't think we're as a community or as a whole want to hold any grudges or anything like that. But it's fascinating. It must have been a lot more prevalent of an issue just because of how differently they lived and how much that they caused problems because of, well, they would take what they wanted, take what they needed, cause so many heartache and issue. So hopefully we can remember that just life is hard and messy, but through it all, if you're faithful, these seemingly small points of God preserved us with this or that become something more of a faithful foundation. If there's one thing I would hope people could continually do, it is remember, remember. Oh, if we could just remember all the blessings that God gives us and be thankful for them. For every time that we can think of Jesus Christ extending to us so much mercy, if we could remember our sins, not to weigh us down, but remember our sins to keep us humble, so that we may be made joyful and happy in the presence of mercy from Jesus Christ, so that we can have his Spirit with us, that we can remember the little mercies he gives us each day. With that, I hope the Spirit of the Lord is with you. I'll see you.